couple of armchair GMs who have yet to be wrong with any of their Timberwolves takes. Right. It's Flagrant Howls with Phil Mackey and Kyle Theige.
So it's kind of funny, Kyle. We were talking the other day on Flagrant Howls. Thank you guys for listening, whether you're listening or watching. We appreciate your support through this tumultuous, annoying season. And we were talking about the rebounding problem and then the math problem of, man, this team, they just start every game with like a 10-plus point deficit in three-pointers. And last night, that may have boiled over to a full-on crisis. They played basketball for 2.5 hours in Los Angeles, and they made 4 3-pointers against the Clippers. The lowest scoring game of the year for the Wolves, 88 points, 4 for 22 from downtown. At one point, Chris Finch said, oh, my God, let's put Bryn Forbes as like our three-point specialist. Let's just dust him off, throw him out there. All right, Bryn cracks the knuckles, lines up a three wide open from the left wing, and I think it hit off the opposite side of the backboard. So that's how that's going right now.
Rumor has it Bryn Forbes really likes to mix in a Red Bull before games. All these guys drink a lot of caffeine and stuff before games, but he always seems like he's really amped up and jittery. And all I could think of last night was maybe like a sugar-free Red Bull or something, because that first three off the the right side of your screen, and it goes over the rim and just almost takes out the backboard. We talked about math on Tuesday, and they really gave a college level course last night on numbers and accounting, and you're never going to win a game when you make 4 3-pointers. So forget bringing knives to a gunfight. They're bringing plastic spoons now without D'Lo and Carl and Taurean Prince and Jordan McLaughlin. That's 4 of your 9-man rotation. Yeah. They are just swimming uphill right now, and the only hope really at this current moment is to get guys back, because they had a talent deficiency last night, and it makes sense, but boy, it was not a game that you will rewatch or send to the Hall of Fame.
We've sort of crossed over the line of, okay, let's see what this thing looks like if you just put Carl off to the side and let some other things gel.
Yep.
But it's like, okay, now let's put D'Lo off to the side. Let's take both point guards and put them off to the side, and Taurean Prince. And so it's you're right. At this point, it's a major talent deficiency. They really had an 8-man rotation last night, except for the 4 minutes of Forbes, and then the Iowa Wolves came in and collectively nudged the plus minus into a +5 because it was garbage time. But anyways, let's dive into this story that came out on Yahoo, if we could. Little reckless speculation on this Thursday here. It is Reckless Speculation Thursday.
Reckless speculation.
So I'm reading the aggregated version of this from silverscreenandroll.com. It was the first article I clicked on. It's like SB Nation. So actually, he's probably one of your former.
Shout out to Harrison Fagan. He's a good Lakers site on SB Nation. Not as good as Canis Hoopus on SB Nation, but they did a pretty. I read this too. They did a pretty good write up on the original report from Jake Fisher.
So Jake Fisher, insider, Yahoo Sports. He says Patrick Beverley is reportedly ready to return to the Minnesota Timberwolves if he's traded and bought out by a team. It says, should Beverley ultimately get moved to a rebuilding situation, like if he gets traded to the Pistons or something, the grizzled guard has a desire to return to Minnesota, sources said, should he reach free agency via buyout. I don't know who the exact source is. Hell, maybe it's PatBev himself, could be PatBev's agent. But things aren't going well in LA. Some of it is just he's not playing well. Mm-hmm. Some of it's the roster is weird. He got into an altercation that kind of put him in the bad graces. But this feels like a cry from his camp, putting out the bat signal. Hey, things aren't going well in Los Angeles. If this thing ends in my contract getting traded for an asset, I would love to go back to the Timberwolves. So what do you make of this report? And what is your level of interest in Patrick Beverley coming back to help shore up the leadership and the culture of the 2022-23 Timberwolves?
Well, first things first is I know sometimes we have an inclination to not believe these things, but I've actually, of all the people who cover teams or you set notifications for, I've actually met and hung out with Jake Fisher. He's awesome. He is about as close to a hippie as you could get. So he has really good stuff. So I would imagine that Pat's camp kind of tipped him off on this. Patrick Beverley has been in every Lakers trade discussion since he got there. It just hasn't worked out. He's also just like, I think he's averaging a career low in points, 4 points a game, three rebounds.
He can't make a three.
25% from three. He's having a terrible season. I refuse to believe that he's fallen off that much of a cliff, but this was also one of your concerns. It's like Minnesota's not going to sign him to a 5-year extension because I don't know if he's got 5 good years in him. So do I believe PatBev wants to come back to Minnesota? Yeah. I know that he really was fond of how he was received by the fans specifically. His love for the city, which is so weird because, it's just these guys usually think of the coast and the big markets, but he really loves Minnesota. Would he be a benefit to this team? Absolutely. Because we can get into cap stuff or whatever. You basically, like, Austin Rivers is on like a semi-guaranteed contract. You could probably just waive him. Again, Bryn Forbes, maybe you could just cut him. Nate Knight's another one. So you can make the roster work. My 2 questions, and I'm going to spit it back to you, is one, you welcome him back, but you have to do so under a contingency. It's like Patrick Beverley can't come and start again. Because if he starts, you can't like move Jaden McDaniels to the bench again. Like, so you got to say, Pat, are you willing to come back in a different role than you did in the past? And number 2, and this is the thing that no one has had this take yet. Do you think, Phil, the major stakeholders of this team want him back? Because
who would you put in that?
I would say Chris Finch,
players. Okay,
Karl Anthony Towns, and let's say Tim Connolly. If the Wolves are 6 games under 500 and they go and get Patrick Beverley and this thing kind of turns around, Patrick Beverley might become the most powerful person in the organization. Because what that says to me is that Pat is all of the magic pixie dust. You know what I mean? Like, it kind of undermines Finch and Towns. And I'm not even, I want Pat back, by the way, but it does, like, if Pat's the sole fix to this, it kind of undermines the coach or the best players or the president, because it's like, Pat's the only one that can change this. Pat's the only one that can relift the culture. And I do believe some of that stuff because he's a good leader. But the thing about the past is that it's in the past. So I would welcome him. They need some leader. They need that toughness that they lost in Vando, that competitiveness they lost in Beasley. But it's not, if he comes back, it's not going to look like it did last year. He can't start because you can't move one of your 2 young guys to the bench. Unless you're going to then move D'Lo as well. Like, it's got to be different, and he has to welcome that role and just be kind of happy that he's on a team that has better chances to contend than the Lakers do. That's my
what's kind of amazing is that, and I'll answer your question here because the stakeholder thing is, I think different stakeholders would have different opinions on this. But one thing I'm not sure I realized, I know that he's largely been starting lately in his career, and he started with the Timberwolves, and he has started all 21 games he has played in for the Lakers this year starts. And he's playing 27 minutes per game. So he's a starter who's playing in more than half the game. I didn't realize that his whole career since his first year in the NBA, he's basically been a star. I kind of thought, there's been like 3 or 4 years where he's come off the bench. Then there's other teams that need him to start. Mm-hmm. Patrick Beverley, if you take away his first year in the league after he played in Greece and Russia, and then he got to the Rockets as a part-time player. So that you take that year off the books, he has started 91% of his NBA games. So
that's incredible stat.
Could he come in from an ego perspective? But to a couple of your points, if he's the fix, let's say that he comes in and it's not that he's the best player. Maybe he is eroding at age 34, but he comes in and then this thing just clicks, right? What does that say about the fragility of it all? That you can't even function as an organization. You're a bumbling 12 seed in the Western Conference unless you have this sort of bit player, bulldog leader guy that comes in. And I said this about some of the leadership articles that came out, like Star Tribune wrote a good one about 3 weeks ago, and there's been some good conversations about leadership among the Wolves media community. What does it say that Austin Rivers has to announce that now I'm going to step up and lead, or that Taurean Prince a month ago says, all right, I'm the one that's kind of leading the film study here, or Anthony Edwards has to announce that, okay, now I'm the leader. Like, the whole thing just seems fragile. Even a performance like last night. I know that you're down D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns, but just how do you get run out of the gym in the fourth quarter like that? A lot of it's just a dearth of people who can take the game and the season by the collar and jerk it in the right direction. PatBev can kind of do that with at least his voice and the defense and the energy that he plays with. But if he's the guy that brings you from being a non-playing team to being a team that all of a sudden makes a run, I would have many, many, many more questions about the rest of it. His role all along was supposed to be help get this thing guided in the right direction for maybe a year or two. And then the young birds learn how to fly on their own. And this is supposed to be the year where the young birds fly on their own. Some of those young birds aren't even that young anymore, like D'Lo and Cat, for instance, right? So I'm mixed. Like, if he can help save the season because he somehow brings this level of leadership and guidance and defense and energy and, tenacity that they lack, awesome. But it would also shine a huge light on the long-term deficiencies of the current players that they have. So I'm kind of riding both sides with my answer, but I'm very conflicted on this.
Back to the stats for a second. He's actually playing more minutes this season per game than he did for the Wolves. And again, basically all of his statistics are down. So if you want to sell me or sell yourself or sell Tim Connolly on all the other stuff, the intangible stuff, I'm right with you, because Phil and I have been doing leadership power rankings for 10 weeks. Like, that's a void. This team has a void. And should the older young guys like Carl and D'Lo have already stepped up? Yeah. Are the younger guys, like Jalen or Jaden or Ant ready to do it? Maybe not. So if he can come in and be a voice in the locker room, that's great. And it's not a perfect comp, but there are some, comparisons to, I have 100 favorite Kevin Garnett moments. They are all during his first stint in Minnesota, right? It is bringing back KG. And I know that there's more time in between KG's first stint and second stint. Pat was here last year, but bringing him back, it's great. You'll sell some tickets. You'll have a crazy press conference, but he was just a different player, older. He had lost a step. He had lost some things. He was obviously great to Carl as a young player. He was great in the locker room. That's what you want from Pat. But from a basketball standpoint, we just said they made 4 threes last night. If you're going to think that a guy who is shooting 25% from 3 and has to start is going to help the basketball product on the court, you're high. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, he's not a very good basketball player at this moment. Maybe he's misused. I get all that stuff, but like, the Lakers need talent and he's not giving them much. So I am still, gun to my head, willing to pull the trigger. But I also think too, like, we get excited by seeing Patrick Beverley, Minnesota in the same tweet. He would have to not only be traded, but then that team would have to buy him out. Like, if he does get traded to a team that's like, no, we're trying to make the playoffs too, we want to have that energy, then that's it. So like, there are so many steps to get to this point. I would do it, but I just would do it for reasons that don't really have anything to do with basketball.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my take on it.
So yeah, another way to look at it is, okay, if this happened, who are you kicking out of the rotation? And it's not that hard of an equation to figure out. Although when you have everyone healthy,
it's like a little harder.
Right now you would just kick like Bryn Forbes or Austin Rivers is an interesting one because in theory, Austin Rivers brings you at a younger age, not that much younger, but he's 30, but 4 years younger. He brings you sort of the tenacity, leadership, etc. that maybe Pat Bev could bring, but I don't think he's as good at it. I mean, last night he played awful basketball. He couldn't make a shot. He was out there for almost 30 minutes, didn't grab a rebound. He can play some defense and put the clamps down a little bit, and he is vocal. But if it came down to it, once everyone came back healthy, so when D'Lo comes back, when Cat, Torrey, and Prince come back, those guys are in the rotation, and then Bryn Forbes would get bumped back out, and Austin Rivers would get bumped back out. I would replace either one of those guys with Pat Bev, and then I would have to find some extra minutes in there somewhere. I mean, maybe he takes some Jordan McLaughlin minutes. Maybe he takes some Jalen Noel minutes, which, again, I know we just raved 2 months ago about how, now Jalen Noel gets to take all those minutes from Pat Beverley. So this is why it's hard. I want to see more Jalen Noel minutes and see how this season progresses. Could you convince Pat Bev, so you're not going to start, at least not right away. You're not going to play 25 minutes. You're going to have to be Pat Bev and do Pat Bev things in 15 to 18 minutes max, because we need to provide minutes for some of these younger players that we think have huge upside. So would he be willing to bring the PatBev influence, but put some of the PatBev ego aside and take on a non-starting role that he really hasn't had to take on so far in his career?
Well, to your point, you brought this up a couple weeks ago. Ideally, you would bring him back in a still active. He'd be playing a little more, but like, will you accept the Udonis Haslem role?
He's the Wolves culture. Maybe these are the seeds of Heat culture, Wolves culture, right? Pat Bev, 41 years old in 7 years, just holding a clipboard with a uniform on, right?
Like, would the Wolves be down to keep paying Pat like the Heat pay Haslem? Again, Haslem won championships with the Heat, but Patrick Beverley basically won championships with the Timberwolves in terms of what their bar is and like
right.
getting to the playoffs.
They want a play-in game, damn it. What more do you want from us?
So Austin Rivers, and I'm a huge Austin Rivers fan, he just can't. He has a good career and a good resume. He doesn't have any clout with this team, and you can't lead if you're Austin Rivers with 15 to 18 minutes a game. I think Patrick Beverley does have clout with this team and with this roster and could lead and be a large voice in the locker room, even if he catches a stray DNP. But again, there has to be a common ground here. And this is my only reservation is that it's not going to be what it was last year because nothing is what it was in the past. Like you got to embrace the future here. And would you be like, Pat, we'll continue to keep you employed. You know, we'll agree under the table that, you know, Glenn sits out with Joe Smith. Like we will keep paying you every year, but you have to be an extension more so of the coaching staff than, you know, like a combative player versus the coaching staff or whatever, that type of stuff. So it would work. They need him. He did set the culture, but it just, I'm not going to, man, they kept Jaden McDaniels instead of giving up two additional first round picks. You can't bring Pat in and then move Jaden back to the bench. Like you got to really invest. And when Carl comes back, that's Jaden. You got 5 starters that really can't sit unless you move D'Lo. So it would take a good communication. It would take a good talk between Finch and Pat to make this work. But I'm not shocked, to loop it back to the top, that Patrick Beverley wants to come back because that dude absolutely might have been one of his best years and most enjoyable years was being in Minnesota and playing for those fans.
Yeah. Because Udonis Haslem is I love that comparison. He's also still at age 42, technically still an active member of the Miami Heat. He has played in 4 games this year. Udonis Haslem in the last 6 seasons has played 260 total minutes. An NBA basketball game is 48 minutes. He has played 260 minutes in the last 6 seasons on the Heat, and then he played 130 the year. The last time he played actual meaningful rotational minutes was 2014-15. And so for 8 years, he has been an actively paid. It's basically like you're overpaying for an assistant coach, and he just puts a uniform on and kind of hangs out on the bench, right?
Yep.
That's basically what they're doing. But he's involved at practice and stuff. I kind of like where you're going here.
And Anthony Edwards was so close to Ricky Rubio. And it was he was an 18-year-old kid. He was a puppy, and he didn't really know what was going on, and Rubio kind of took him under his wing. He had that same kind of relationship with Pat. And those guys, I mean, I remember in Vegas when they met for the first time in summer or in preseason or whatever, like Pat, I don't think he played that game, but Pat sprinted to half court right before the ball was tipped, by the way, a very Patrick Beverley thing, and hugged. And like those two guys have a tight connection. And if you are one of those people that the only real hope you have with this team or this franchise is strapped to the shoulders of a 21-year-old kid from Atlanta in Anthony Edwards, you do moves like this to get him people that can, maybe, listen, man, you can't do college in a year. Maybe Anthony Edwards needs a couple more years of the Patrick Beverley school of leadership, the school of being a dog. So I'm totally for it. I want to preface it by saying it's got to be more, it's got to be more Udonis Haslem than it's going to be, the Kevin Garnett second time where he gets the honorary position and gets to start. But the leadership void is real. And you and I had identified it right around October 1st. So if they can bring him back and they can make these dominoes line up, I think it's a good decision.
Pat Beverley has acted like a guiding hand for the Timberwolves, just like Federated Mutual Insurance Company can act as a guiding hand for your business. In fact, Federated's been around almost as long as Pat Beverley, since 1904. Based in Owatonna, Minnesota. They are one of us, and they have been providing risk management tools and resources and guidance and face-to-face relationships with business owners for a long, long time inside and outside the state of Minnesota. You can find out more information at federatedinsurance.com, where it's our business to protect yours. Also, our friends at St. Thomas, that's right, they have Division I sports now at St. Thomas as of last year. You can see a couple things in the next week or so. Division I hoops action for just $15. St. Thomas takes on North Dakota on Monday night and North Dakota State on Wednesday night. So you were UND, right? You told me that the other day.
Shout out to our sponsors, the Tommies. But anytime
want
they
them
play
to
UND,
die a slow death against North Dakota.
Yep, pretty much. I have nothing good to say about you when you play my team. But they just switched to D1 recently, right? Like that was a big move.
It's their second year. Yeah,
cool.
In
love
fact,
that stuff.
As a Minnesota Gopher myself, boy, I don't think the Gophers want the Tommy smoke this year. If those two teams played, I think St. Thomas in their second year of D1 would give the Gophers all they can handle this year. So
could the Gophers men's basketball team beat the Timberwolves?
The Gophers men's basketball team is a train wreck. Could one of the best college teams, not like Purdue, beat the Timberwolves right now? Without Cat and D'Lo?
I do love that. Anytime like Alabama's good at football, like, could they beat
the Jaguars? No, they could not. And by the way, the hockey team also plays Ferris State this Friday and Saturday night. So TommySports.com to get your tickets. TommySports.com. Get your tickets. Since we're kind of doing the speculation thing here on this Reckless Speculation Thursday.
Reckless Speculation.
I have a question. This is going to infuriate at least half of our audience, but I feel obligated to be the one that throws this out there because
I respect that.
Nobody else has the courage to ask this question. So D'Angelo Russell has been really, really good the last 10 to 12 games. We're seeing the version of D'Lo that we wanted to see. He's basically just said, I'm not a point guard. Screw it. You can call me a point guard. I'm not a point guard. I'm gonna do D'Lo things. Somebody else can stir this drink once in a while. But I'm gonna play off the ball as I want to. And even last night when he was out, I mean, Anthony Edwards was the one initiating a lot of the offense against the Clippers for better or worse. But my question to you is, his value is going up as a player. His contract expires at the end of the year. It's like a $30 million expiring contract that could be valuable for someone looking to clear cap space. The Timberwolves would clear some cap space letting his contract come off the books, but because they are currently without him projected to be only about $14 million below the cap, they wouldn't recoup the full $30 million in value if they just let his contract expire. So my question to you is, to what extent would you consider trading that contract in the next 2 months before the deadline, seeing that his value, so now you're getting a decent player and you get to clear out the contract if you're an opposing team. So there's sort of two value propositions. Or would you look to execute a sign and trade next summer because, hey, he's building his value. He's playing pretty well. Maybe he's in line for a multi-year contract with somebody else, but the Timberwolves don't want to go that far toward the luxury tax. I guess generally, how would you approach D'Lo here and this entire situation over the next 2 months and then going into next summer?
This one's not really a take. It's really simple. Like the D'Angelo Russell situation has to be resolved by the middle of February. It has to. You have no choice. The sign and trade option sounds great, but if he, and I like D'Angelo Russell, he has been a frisky person in the past to deal with. And if he thinks he was scorned by the team and doesn't want to do a sign and trade for some reason, I mean, financially, it's always good for those players to do it. They make a little more money. But if he just says, no, I don't want to help my former employer, then you are literally, I mean, I did this once when I moved out here, Phil. Like, I had a job and then I wanted to go to Hawaii for 3 weeks. So I just quit my job. I went to Hawaii for 3 weeks. And then I came back and didn't have a job. I didn't have anything figured out. So if the Timberwolves are just going to try to go into the summer, July 1st, and quit that job and they have no backup plan, they are, I would say, doomed. Like, if you're not going to sign D'Lo in July, you have to move off of him before the deadline, because you don't, again, for the basic dad, if you're listening, they don't get $30 million when D'Lo leaves. That's not how the salary cap really works. So you have to address this point guard thing. I mean, today's a big day. Today is December 15th. I think like 98% of players now are eligible to be traded. Today And for the next 2.5 months, you're going to have a lot of notifications from Woj and Shams. But yeah, I don't think that's a hot take or anything. Like, and he's been good. So maybe you want to lean into it a little more. There was a report last night during the ESPN broadcast that they think Carl will come back early January. So you got, probably 3 more weeks of this. I think D'Lo is really, truly day-to-day. I wouldn't be shocked if he plays on Friday against the Thunder, but you gotta figure this out now. You have already done some damage to the value of all this and the hope and the optimism and the fan base. Like, you need to figure this out now or in the next couple of months. And even if that's decided, we're going to extend them, we're going to sign them, that's our best option. Okay, that's fine. But you cannot just sit on your hands, because this fan base and this roster and this ownership group, I think we said this the other day, like, this is the next level of payment this month. Mark Lowry and A-Rod owe Glenn some money coming up. I know has some friends that have been reached out about ticket sales, like for the 22 or the 23-24 season. Like, you need to make an adjustment to this roster sooner than later. And that involves D'Lo, because he is the one guy who's not tied to this franchise past this summer.
And it's asset management, right? You've got this is what I was hammering the Twins for with this Carlos Correa thing. People think it was about, would you give him 13 years, 350? No. 13 years for a 28-year-old very good baseball player is aggressive for any level market team, especially mid. The discussion was, okay, 10 months ago, you have an asset that falls into your lap. What is your long-term plan to maximize the asset? Do you okay, let's throttle down immediately and build a playoff team that can make a run and take advantage of this? Okay, that would be the ideal thing. But if you can't, if you're the Twins, all right, well, we got this 1-year asset. If we're not, and I know that they were in first place for a while, but it's like, he's going to leave you. He's going to leave. You have an asset, a huge asset that's not going to be with you in a year. Can you either can you spin it for prospects or some other value, or can you take advantage and win now? And so for D'Lo, if the Wolves were sitting in like the 3 seed right now and they were 6 games above 500, this would not be a conversation. I would be saying, just ride it. This is the look at the chemistry of this team. They have a real chance. This thing is gelling in the first 2 months. It's only going to get better. And, maybe you get screwed in the end and D'Lo goes and signs somewhere else. But this thing is too good right now to just think about trading one of the key pieces. But they're not. They're 2 games under 500. They're not even in the play-in picture right now. I do think they're going to keep getting better. But you have an asset right now. It's not a huge LeBron James in his prime-like asset, but it's a $30 million expiring contract and a player that some teams would covet to be a point guard or a combo guard on their team, right? So to your point, and this, I know people are screaming at us like, you guys you're trading D'Lo. He's one of their best players right now. This is about long-term asset management. They just traded away a ton of first-round picks for something that right now isn't working that well. And then you have another key piece here that's about to come off the books. And if you play it wrong, you're going to wind up with no assets coming back to you and not enough cap space to just go and sign another $30 million point guard, right? So what's the best way to manage this asset that is the D'Angelo Russell contract and D'Lo the player? And I'm with you. Like, they should be exploring this in the next 2 months unless they're very confident in a potential sign and trade, which is a very risky line to walk next July.
2 things. One, I want to preface this once a week. I actually am with you. You said a thing. I think this is going to get better. I have no stake in it. We're going to be doing pods in January, February, March. Even if this team sucks, we might talk about real estate or things we like, but I do think this team is going to get better. I still believe in my heart of hearts that they're going to make the playoffs. But I will say, just to be fair, because that's what we do here, I would not even say push back. If they were the 4 seed right now, I would still be saying the D'Lo thing needs to be resolved in the next 10 weeks.
And resolved could be extension for you.
Right. Because you can sign him in the season. Like, they could just throw money at him tonight in LA or in OKC and be like, would you sign this? But even if they were a top 4 seed in the West, the you said it so much better than I did. Asset management is so much more important because you have already not really managed your other assets. I still believe having the players is worth a lot. They gave up so many picks for Rudy. It was always an overpay, but you can trade Rudy again and get 75% of his value. That's a fact. I know he's hated online. I know teams make fun of him, but there are smart people that really want that guy on their team. There are. That's just how the NBA works. People wanted Andrew Wiggins. Okay. And it turned out really well for them. If we can get him into our system and our chemistry and our, whatever, we can make it work. But you have to figure this out. You do, because you don't have, like Phil said, you don't have a pick this summer. You don't have the ability to go out and sign, Tyus Jones to 3 years, $45 million. You have to figure this out, whether you're good or bad. So is now the time to strike when he's actually been really good? Maybe. And it's nothing, dude. If this was Carl, I'd say the same thing. If this was Jaden, I'd say the same thing. Like, he's the only guy that's not tied to this franchise for the next 4 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. And again, asset management. That's what Tim Connolly's paid a ton of assets to do, is to manage the assets. So you got to figure it out.
Yep. So we'll see. I think we should keep. It doesn't have to be a weekly thing here, but I think as long as the speculation about how they could improve is more interesting than the way they're actually playing on the court, then I think we can devote some time to playing armchair GM here throughout, whether it's the PatBev stuff or other moves they could potentially make. I'll tell you what, I know that last night was a bad night all around, but I continue to love the Kyle Anderson move. He's just such he's this, like, he fits with everything. He can do 16 different things. He's not like elite at any one thing, but if you need him to run point, he'll do it. All right, we need you to grab some rebounds tonight and gang rebound. Okay, cool. Need you to knock down some threes tomorrow night. Okay, yeah, I can hit you a couple threes. It's just been, so that is one thing in a season in which not many things have gone right. Kyle Anderson has been a major glue guy for this team so far. I just want to throw that out there.
Britt Robson did a great article over at Min Post about Kyle Anderson it's positive. It's worth checking out. And yeah, again, to the D'Lo thing, he has been one of the brightest spots, maybe the best player over the last 2 weeks for this team. It has nothing to do with that dude or his personality or any of that stuff. It's just, this is still a business. This isn't Major League Baseball where you're uncapped or you can do all this stuff. Like, you have to figure this situation out. And if you're upset that we're talking about trading D'Lo, then be even more upset about how much Tim Connolly paid to get Rudy Gobert, because if this team had all their picks and everything was fine, you could probably risk playing it out. But you don't, right? Like, Dane Moore talked about this 6 months ago before the Gobert stuff. The Wolves were setting up 2023 to have a ton of cap space because D'Lo did come off the books, but then you also did, in that situation, have a bunch of free money to spend. Well, that money went to Rudy. So you don't have that option anymore. So it's not about his play. I thought he's been really good. He's been great in the locker room, but he is the guy that is not here long-term. And that's why he has to be the first option you think about.
Yeah. It also, like, we're talking about this from a Wolves perspective of what should they do with D'Lo? What would they offer or not D'Lo, this or that? I don't know what D'Lo thinks. I don't think he hates it in Minnesota, but let's keep in mind, Chris Finch benched him for the last 6 minutes of a Game 6 playoff clinching contest.
Right.
And fans have booed him a little bit, like, rightfully so. I think when you're making that much money and you start the season as poorly as he did, dude, you can't play that way for the first 10 games of the season. And you can't not be a leader if you're going to be in that high profile of a spot. So I don't have a problem with the way that fans have kind of gotten on him. But if he's not feeling the full love from the fans, he's not feeling the full love from the coach in a key moment, and maybe he kind of feels like Anthony Edwards more and more is going to be the driver of this offense. And who knows if those guys are a perfect fit together. And I guess I could see a world in which maybe he'd like to go explore his options and how many times in your life are you going to be an unrestricted free agent with a chance to make $20 or $30 million a year doing what you do for a living? This is one of a small handful for D'Angelo Russell. So you got to think about it from his perspective too, as his contract is set to expire, and take advantage of the asset that you have before it takes advantage of you.
And before you hop in the mentions or the comments and say no one will take D'Lo, I think it was Dan Devine. He covers the NBA. He put out a really good tweet yesterday. It was simply, which NBA fan bases are happy right now? And there was 1,000 replies, and all the replies were 4 teams. It was like the Bucks, the Jazz, the Celtics,
Pelicans,
and like the Pelicans, right? But go look through this. Dude, there are countless teams that are having as many negative podcasts during the week as you and I have, right? So the Heat, maybe the Suns, the Mavs, maybe the Nets want to rekindle that old D'Lo chemistry flame. Like, there's a ton of teams that would make a deal for him. Now they're going to want, to give you their bad contracts or whatever, but there'd be options. And that's why, again, Tim Connolly, all the Avengers up in Mayo Square, like, this is what you get paid to do. And if your experiment, doesn't bubble over like you thought it was going to, you need to pivot and you need to be looking forward. I mean, Tim Connolly signed for 5 years or whatever. Like, you have to have a 5-year plan, and that includes figuring out your point guard.
I'll give you two other fan bases that are elated right now are the Rockets and Spurs, both tied for last place in the Western Conference, tanking as they planned to. Maybe their fans are mad that those teams have actually won 9 games already. Kind of crazy.
They're feisty. Yeah. I mean, the Hornets as well. The Pistons just shut down Cade Cunningham for the season. So there's some happy teams. But if you really, truly, if you look in the middle of Dallas, Golden State might be without Steph Curry for a couple of weeks, like Dallas, Golden State, Phoenix, the Clippers, even like there's a lot of teams that are just really pissed off right now. Yeah. So they know what we are going through.
All right, let's dive into the comments here. It's time for an edition here of Phil and Kyle Read the Comments on the SKOR North YouTube channel. You can also hit us up via the feedback tab in the SKOR North app. This one comes from, I believe it's Tabo Parancel. I'm butchering your pronunciation there. Thank you for the podcast. It's great. I'm a bit surprised at how lightly pissed you guys seemed after the bleep show in Portland. They weren't even trying, and the coverage on Lillard was so bad. Portland literally ran the same play for a three-point shot on the wing 3 straight times. We did not adjust whatsoever. I was a big Finch believer, but I wonder how much more patient we need to be. He has a bunch of other stuff in here, but yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm not going to get it's going to be very rare that I get irate after any 1 or 2 games. I think, especially with the nature of this podcast, we are not doing this as a post-game show. Mm-hmm. You and I kind of agreed, just even for lifestyle reasons, you have a day job and do other content. I'm producing Mackey and Judd and Purple Daily and some other stuff we're going to record this after sleeping on it the next day. So maybe if you would have caught us in the 5 minutes right after the second Portland game, you would have heard me going bonkers. So maybe that's part of it. But, I guess why aren't you more mad, Kyle? Why aren't you ripping your headset off and throwing it at the screen more often here?
This isn't going to go over well with everyone. And this is all jokes aside and not a bit. I'm using my lunch break right now from trying to cure cancer to talk about the Timberwolves.
You don't have cancer.
No. But thank you for breaking that silence there. I will never tell fans how to act. And I think if you are someone who just this is your escape and your escape sucks and you want to get mad about it, I believe that. I really do think one of the coolest bits or segments or whatever is Vikings Vent Line. I tune into it every Sunday because it's an awesome spot where you guys just let people vent their happiness or their frustration. Maybe one day we can evolve this into something like that, where people can just John Krasinski was going to write an article this week where he basically said, send me all your frustration and let's talk about it. I love that. This is how I move forward and have done in the past. You try to look at sports fun. I'm pissed off. The Blazers game was terrible. I was hitting Dane Moore in the third quarter. I was like, is Finch just not going to, is he bringing the timeouts to LA? Like, what are we doing? There have been more frustrating moments this season than the first 5. And some of those seasons were 19-41. So I'm with you. I know this fan base. I've said it before. I think this is the greatest fan base in the world, especially when it comes to basketball. They've been through more. They've received less. They still continue to tune in. They still continue to invest. And if you're mad, you should be mad. You should be pissed off. It's just, for me, what I do 9 to 5 and what I got going on in my personal life, this is always, every time I log in with Phil, I'm smiling. So should we have been more critical? For sure. There are people that are critical. That's why Britt Robson is such a necessary evil for us, because he'll just tell it to you straight. And I do believe this is going to get better. But if you're mad, you should be mad. It's not something I've ever really gotten into. And if I'm really, really mad, I probably just get drunk and text Phil.
Well, and on the flip side, I think it'll be interesting to see the dynamic of this show. You are definitely more of the sort of, hey, I'm going to take an optimistic view at this, and you are choosing to engage with the Wolves in that way. I will 5 times a year completely crap on this team and say some things that I may or may not regret.
I like that.
On a vent line or a podcast. I am not. They're not 7-20. Okay, right. They're hovering around 500. It's been frustrating. Mm-hmm. We have ranted. I think the audience knows how I feel largely about the lack of leadership from D'Lo and Karl Anthony Towns, and I don't need to continue to beat that dead horse on this episode. but I'm kind of taking a more patient approach in the first 2 or 3 months of the year because of how massive this roster shakeup was. And now it's even like Cat is out and D'Lo has been banged up. And so I guess I'm just kind of sitting back here a little bit before I get passionately mad about something until they move further away from 500 and until we have a little bit more finality in terms of what this iteration of the Wolves roster feels like. But trust me, when the gloves need to come off, I will definitely take them off on this podcast. But it doesn't feel like the right time to just like bury them right
Dude,
now.
it's been terrible. This season has sucked. It has been so frustrating. But there have also been 16 chapters in what is a 28 game season so far. Like, think about Carl's illness in the preseason, and then there's no Carl now, and then there's this, and then there's that. Like, there's been so many things. And as much as we want change, like one of the proudest articles I ever wrote when I was at Canis was titled "An Open Letter to Gerson Rosas," and it was just me trying to speak for the fans and vent. And I thought it was pretty good. We're probably nearing that level with Tim Connolly at some point, right? But they do have a lot of built-in excuses about guys not being available, guys being hurt, all this change, where no one wants to hear this, and I know that, but I also am commenting on what they think. They just want some more time. And if you hate that, that's fine, but I'm actually in the camp of let's just let this marinate a little more.
Agreed.
So we have a definitive. Let's see 20 more games of maybe Finch just isn't cut out to coach this team, because I think they made a rash decision in the first place to do this Gobert deal. I'm still high on Gobert, but they took a team that won north of 500 for the first time in a while and made the playoffs and immediately pushed their chips into the middle. So I don't want to immediately fire a coach in Chris Finch and replace him with, someone else that's like, okay, Finch wasn't the problem. I don't want to immediately dump a guy because you think he's not playing well. And it's like, oh, wow, that, I still think about Andrew Wiggins, Phil. Like, we were over him and we had enough data, but then he went and kind of figured it out in another team. So I would like internally for them to just get a little, know who you can ride with and who you can't. And I don't think we're at that level yet, even though being 13 and 15 sucks.
And as you're figuring out who to ride with, where do they need to sit in the car? And that was the issue with Wiggins, is for years he was acquired as a driver. Mm-hmm. We need you to drive this franchise's car. And after about a year and a half, it was like, ooh, he doesn't even want to take control of like what song we're playing. He
doesn't want the aux cord.
Yeah, why doesn't he want the aux cord? Why isn't he needs to be told when to stop for gas. Dude, we need you to be thinking about this stuff. And so he goes over to the Warriors. They're like, oh, dude, we definitely want to ride with you, but you're going to just be kind of sitting in the back right seat there. You're going to be able to be sitting next to Draymond. Steph's going to be up here next to Clay and Draymond, and you'll just be back here and, just chime in with a joke once in a while to keep the road trip going, right? And that's the role that he needs to be in. And so with Carl, once again, it was like, dude, we need to drive the car. Hey, Carl, are you comfortable driving the car? Carl, quit freaking out. There's a traffic jam. There's no need to spaz, and we're going to get into an accident if you keep spazzing in the driver's seat. I think Carl needs to sit maybe in the back left, maybe in the back middle at some point. Can that happen with the Timberwolves in a smooth way that doesn't bruise egos and offend people, right? Like, if this team's going to win big in the playoffs, is Carl the driver of the car, or is Ant the driver of the car? Is Ant ready to drive the car? Maybe he needs 2 more years. Like this, these are things that are hard to figure out.
Last night's game against the Clippers sucked, just like everything has sucked. But last night was no Carl and no D'Lo, and just an extra emphasis on kind of like point Ant with Rudy Gobert. They ran out of steam. Again, they were trying to stave off the Clippers with plastic silverware, but they were up 44-38 or 43-38 at half. And I thought it was one of the most promising 24 minutes of like, this is what it looks like if Ant gets the keys. There was turnovers. There were some bad decisions, but he looked engaged on both ends. And he continues to be, I see a lot of times where people go back to like, oh, remember this season sucked or this season sucked. A lot of those seasons in the past that were 30 games below 500 and you were miserable didn't have Anthony Edwards. And that is the one beacon of hope that I still believe in, is that this team still has Ant. Mm-hmm. He's going to sign next year. They're going to sign Jaden. Whatever you think of Jaden, like, they still have this kid who's moxie and chemistry, or personnel and all that stuff is only starting to grow. He's been playing really good basketball lately. He is the reason I have hope. But yeah, to your point, like, let's find out over these next couple weeks. I'm not trying to just be patient until April. Like, this needs to make a seismic shift probably sometime in January. That's why the trade deadline is middle of February. Yeah. This team, if they figure it out that this isn't our season, but we can make the most out of it, and we can now early invest our asset management into the next season, you have to do it. So no one wants to hear patience. No one wants to hear calm down. And I'm not saying any of that. You should be mad. You should be riled up. Tell your ticket people when they ask you, hey, are you going to re-up for next season? Tell them what's pissing you off. But I just don't want to, if you think the Gobert trade was a mistake, I don't want to compound that mistake by making more quick decisions without knowing exactly who we can trust to move forward and build with.
Amen. You got to get to a meeting, and I've got to get to posting this speculative, juicy episode of Flagrant Howls here. So thanks to everyone for hanging out with us here. Please click the subscribe button on the YouTube channel, the like button, help spread the word about this self-loathing community that we are all a part of. And if you could give us a 5-star rating and a positive review on Apple Podcasts, help spread the word as well. All right, my friend. Good. That was a good therapy session.
Feel good therapy session. Let's go out and live our sunny Thursday.
Yep. All right. See you guys next time on your favorite Timberwolves lifestyle podcast, Flagrant Howls.